Today is June 27th, 2019. My name is Karen Neurohr. I'm a librarian at Oklahoma State University, and I am here in the Angie Debo room at the Oklahoma State University Library with Miss Kay Enmeier. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. And we're here to do an interview today about Miss Angie Debo. So thank you, Kay, for coming and participating in this interview with me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Guthrie at the hospital, but I lived in Marshall all my life till I was 18 and graduated from Marshall High School. Salutatorian of my class of 11 people. And immediately came to OSU that summer. Went to work at the OSU Botany Herbarium. And completed my freshman year, summer school and freshman year. And then I decided that I was going to lay out a year or go back to work because my dad had lost 2 wheat crops to the hail. So I went to Oklahoma City that following summer and got a job. And then Miss Angie heard that I was dropping out, and she was coming to OSU. She had retired and was coming to OSU to do Oklahoma history for, I think, Dr. Fisher, who was going on sabbatical. It was just going to be a year. And she invited me to live with her. I would do her cooking and cleaning for room and board. And that's what I did.
So how did you get the job in the botany department right after graduating
That
high
was
school?
our vo-tech teacher at Marshall, I think, got me into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not that I was a botanist, it was just a job, 50 cents an hour. And I carried 5 or 6 hours that summer while I was working there.
You jumped right in then,
I
didn't
did.
you?
I had never been away from home, so it was quite a shock.
Where did you live that summer?
I lived in Stout Hall, and I moved in a lot of the dorms because of summer school. They just kind of put you wherever they have open.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived in all the dorms.
And did you continue with that job when you started your fall classes?
Yes, I think at that time I moved into the department office as a typist, and that's where I finished the 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think one summer the head secretary took maternity leave, and I was filled in her head secretary job.
So you must have had good typing skills.
Yes, I was a good typist.
What did you major in here?
My major was, at that time, was home ec, and I was in FR and CD, which is no longer around. I was going to get an elementary education certificate through home ec. And then I found out that you could do it in the College of Education with many or fewer hours. I went from like 124 hours in home ec, it was 132 or something because you had to take a lot of home ec classes. So I switched into the College of Education.
Did you always want to be a teacher?
Well, I think back in those days, the main thing was to get your MRS degree, get married and have a family, and that's an education, or teaching was kind of a side track, a good occupation for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have been 1956.
6, 7, 8, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did you first become acquainted with Miss Angie? You said you grew up in Marshall.
Well, I think Angie was, our famous person. I don't remember I do remember going to her house, but I don't remember any. And of course, I was active, she was active in the churches. So that's how I knew Angie at that time.
Did she teach Sunday school in any of the churches?
She did. Now that was in the Methodist church, and I was going to the Christian church at that time. So that was not part of my knowledge of her.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that she was famous. She was considered famous.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Right.
mm-hmm.
She was the celebrity in Marshall.
Oh, she was.
And that even expanded after I left at 18. She became, they have Prairie City Days parades in her honor. And
Mm-hmm.
she'd been really famous at that time.
Mm-hmm. So, describe your family's interest in education.
Well, I have an older brother who came also to OSU, but he was here only a year or so, and he went to Washington, D.C. in the FBI. And we were the first going to college in my family. My dad was unable to even finish high school because his dad wanted him home working on the farm. And my mother graduated from Marshall High School. So going to college was something new for us.
Mm-hmm.
And after my brother finished in Washington, D.C., and I finished at OSU, and then my sister, who was 12 years younger than I, came to OSU and got her master's at OSU. So we've been there a long time.
Was it unusual for people? Your graduating class had 11, I think you mentioned.
Yes.
How many of those went to college?
Oh, not very many of them.
Mm-hmm.
My sweetheart at the time came to OSU. We came together, and a couple of the girls graduated from college also, but I think primarily most of them did not.
Mm-hmm. What were the Marshall schools like when you were growing up?
Very good. We had our superintendent was C.T. Shades, and he was preparing us for college. He drilled us in English, and he directed plays. We were in choir, chorus, the girls' chorus. He taught us in basketball. It was an all-around thing. What we had were high school dances. Once a month, we'd open up the gym and we'd all come and dance, square dance primarily. And he was in charge of that. It was social.
Mm-hmm.
So he was rather well known too, as Marshall goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a science teacher, Mr. McCullum, big fella. He was, I don't know if I should tell this. There were 3 girls in high school at that time, and we decided to go trick or treating. And we were probably sophomores, and we went to Dr. McCollum's office or house and knocked on the door, and he wouldn't give us any treats. He said, "You girls go home." And I was in home ec. Mrs. Ewing was my home ec teacher, and she taught us how to bake the angel food cakes and do some sewing.
Those
But
sounds
it was a
like.
happy time.
Were you in band?
Oh, I was in band from the 6th grade through senior. Everybody was in band. And the band, we had a big band festival in Marshall.
What was that like?
Oh, it was a very busy time. Bands came from all over the state and marched down our wide main street. And then we'd go to Tri-State, which was in Enid. And that was a fun time too.
Were those competitions then between the different bands?
Yes, Yes, I played a school French horn. So, and I didn't do any solo competition or anything that some members did.
Mm-hmm. What were your uniforms like?
Well, I think we got one set of new uniforms while I was in there. You know, when you start in 6th grade and go all those years, they get worn and tattered, but we did get new ones during that time too. This town was very supportive of everything the school did. You know, everybody was in football, and you were in football and baseball and band, and everybody took part in everything because we weren't that many people.
How did Marshall get the name Dragons for the mascot? Do you have any
I
idea?
don't know about that. We were just always Marshall Dragons. We had a song.
You did. Okay, so after high school, you moved to Stillwater, and you went to summer school all the way through.
Yes.
So how long did it take you to finish college?
I finished in 1960 in January. It was 3.5 years. Tried to get a teaching job at that time, but it's midterm. And I was married. I did not get a teaching job, but I went to work in the OSU counseling department. And as a secretary. And I really preferred secretary to teaching. I found out. I did teach one year. After I graduated, my husband graduated in 61, and we went to Nennecaw for 2 years. He was a BOAG teacher. And then we moved to Snyder, and the 2nd grade teacher dropped out, broke her contract 2 weeks before school started, and the superintendent found out that I had a certificate and put me to work, and so I taught 2nd grade for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got pregnant with my 2nd child, and that was the end of my teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to Stillwater, and
What year did you move to Stillwater?
well, it would have been 65, I think, because my son was 3 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And I substituted in school, and I thought I was going to get a teaching job, but then the teacher that had gone on sabbatical or leave came back in, and she had priorities since she had taught before, so I didn't get a teaching job. And then I got a job at the church as secretary, so.
Which church were you secretary?
Presbyterian.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you do that?
I think I was there 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked it because during the summer I could have the summer off, and they'd hire a college girl to fill in for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I could be home with the boys.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have other jobs after that?
No,
in Stillwater?
I've worked everywhere. I worked at the misdemeanor program for 2 years, and my final job was for a financial advisor, and that's where I retired from. I was there 30 years.
Oh.
So I've had a long career.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go back to when you were planning to drop out of school, and then Miss Angie, you call her Miss Angie.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I've learned from the people in Marshall, and she offered for you to come and live with her.
Yes.
So tell me more about that.
Well, we lived in a small apartment. It was a block east of what is now Zeratin Center, across the block.
Mm-hmm.
It was three rooms, the living room. It's long gone now, it's not there, but there was a living room, and the kitchen and dining area was together. And then there was a little hallway with the bathroom and this hall closet. And my bed was a fold-out bed in the living room, And we kept my bedding in this big box in the closet. And in the back room was Angie's bedroom.
Mhm.
And her typewriter was set up in the living room. I had never slept in a feather bed, but Angie had a feather bed, and she meticulously made that bed. She stripped it all the way to the mattress every day and put it all back together.
Oh.
And of course, mine was, I pulled out the sofa and made the bed and put it away the next day.
Mhm.
My chores, I don't remember us eating or me cooking breakfast and lunch. I think we did that on our own, but we did eat dinner together, and I would cook that. And she introduced me to lamb. I had never eaten lamb, so we had lamb chops and ground lamb with bacon wrapped patty. I remember that. I did the grocery shopping. There was a grocery store on Knobloch where Chris's university store is now. And I could run over there and get groceries. I, of course, did the cleaning, kept the house clean. My mother taught me how to do all that, so it was not a big chore. And it was a small apartment.
Mhm.
Our kitchen was small. It had a porcelain sink that had the drain board on one end, and it stood on legs with the pipes exposed underneath. And we had a paper sack under there where we threw all the egg shells and crushed those up and put them in flower beds. And I still do that. I still have a paper sack that I put throw my eggshells in. So I learned a few things from Angie. She would often, or not, maybe not often, but she invited these two sisters. I don't remember their names. They would come over and listen to classical music on the record player with Angie in the evening. And while they were doing that, I would sit at the dining table and study, or be gone for the evening or something.
Mhm. It sounds like it was a cozy place to live.
Yes, it was.
Mhm. Was she particular about the cooking or cleaning?
No, I don't think so. She would eat anything, you know, we would I think we discussed menus and she would make suggestions, but, and my parents would, you know, when you live in Marshall, you butcher beefs, and there was a locker and had frozen meat, and every once in a while, Mom and Dad would send meat over. I'd go home and they'd come over and give us beef for our larder.
Did you go home on the weekends?
Sometimes, and Angie did too. We both would go to Marshall on the weekends once in a while.
Tell me about the car she was driving. What do you remember about it?
It seems like it's some little short coupe type car that I don't remember. You know, I was 18
Mm-hmm.
and not very impressed with the world. And I probably didn't realize the fame that Angie was, you know. She was just a hometown Marshall girl,
Mm-hmm.
and I was too. So, and I was busy dating my sweetheart, who we finally married in 1959. So we were busy evenings too.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any stories about her driving? I've heard some stories about her driving in Marshall.
Well, I mean, I, of course, as I say, I left at 18 and I was gone, but
Mhm.
they said that when she came down the street, everybody kind of cleared out of the way.
Do you recall her reminiscing any about her college days with you?
No, I don't.
Okay. How about, did she ever offer any advice to you about college or work or
Not that I recall.
anything like
I'm sure
that?
she probably did.
Oh, was she opinionated?
Yes.
What do you remember her being opinionated about?
Well, I don't. But I know she was very stern in her and very precise. You know, being a researcher like she was, everything was ticked off.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you mentioned that your parents would sometimes send beef back with you for you all to share. What other ways were they able to support you when you were going to college?
Well, of course, my dad financially. I did work like 20 hours at the botany office, but that wasn't enough to pay for all my expenses. So Dad did help in that manner. And they were proud of me going to college. So they helped what they could.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, tuition back there, I think, if I recall, it was like $87 for the whole semester. And that was for how many hours you wanted to take. You know, it was just a flat fee.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, but that's a lot of money back then too.
Yes. And did you have to buy books too?
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I had to buy books.
Do any particular professors stand out to you that you had when you were in your
Well, I don't
program?
remember their names. Well, the Serotonin Center, the lady's name has one of the theaters.
Oh, Vivian
Vivian
Locke.
Locke was my speech teacher. And I remember being scared to death to get up to read a child's book as one of my assignments. See, it still scares me. Then there was an English professor, and I don't recall his name either, but he was a wonderful man. I even took some English classes after we moved back to Stillwater, after I had my degree, and took a class from him because he was so marvelous, but I don't recall his name.
Was he teaching literature?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So you were interested in that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well I shared with you that I looked through some of Miss Angie's diaries.
Oh, yes.
And so I can share some of these with you, and then if you have any comments to make, then we'll go ahead, and then we'll move into some other questions too.
All right.
So in 1957,
Mm-hmm.
September 12th, she wrote that she was going to be teaching 3 classes of Oklahoma history. And she said they were too large, 62 in one, 140 students in all. Do you remember her spending time preparing for classes, grading papers, that kind of thing?
No, I did not take her class. I took Oklahoma history in high school, so that was not a requirement for me at OSU.
Oh, uh-huh.
But I don't know. I do not remember her preparing.
Okay.
I know her typewriter was in the living room,
Mm-hmm.
but
What would she use it for?
possibly research and just typing.
Just writing, okay.
Right, maybe preparing for class.
Okay.
I couldn't remember how many classes she taught,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure that kept her busy.
September 9th, 1957, Kay came, bless her.
Oh,
Chauncey
my brother.
brought her.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
September 8th, everybody's so happy that Kay can attend college. Backtrack though, September 7th, I think I got out of order when I was writing. Okay, here we go, let me go back. September 1st, talked with Kay Seafelt, told her she could stay with me and go to college. She had given up and canceled her registration. It may be too late now. September 7th, Kay managed to change her plans, so she will be at college with me. September 21st, Kay's father helped move Angie's rocking chair and record player,
Oh, yes.
and he brought a study table and chair over for Kay. September 28th, went to Marshall. Kay and Sharon Enmeier rode over with me. I enjoyed their bright conversation so much.
That was my husband's sister,
Oh,
Sharon. She was a year younger than us.
okay. And I believe she was going back to Marshall to teach a Sunday school class.
Oh, at the Methodist Church.
Probably on the weekends. On November 21st, she wrote, cold in apartment. Open gas stoves here, which have to be turned off. I certainly enjoyed sleeping with my furnace at Marshall. Do you remember the apartment being cold?
No.
No, okay. November 23rd, Kay stayed in Stillwater, the only weekend she has not come home. November 27th, school closed at noon. Kay's mother and grandmother came for her. December 20th, 1957, school closed today and nearly all the students are home. Kay is waiting on Sharon, who has to work tomorrow forenoon. She is acutely homesick. Talking about you. She and William anxious, quote, to get out of this place. And she underlined it. And she wrote, emphasis impossible to convey in writing.
Ready to leave OSU.
You were ready. Let's see. Should I continue? Okay.
That's really interesting.
Okay. December 21st, 1957, my Kay. You're my Kay now. My Kay and Sharon and William left at noon very happily. Before she left, I found a very fine phonograph record for me below the Christmas tree and the most wonderful, beautiful note.
Don't remember that at all.
Okay. December 28th, she was working on an article for Oklahoma Today magazine about Oklahoma State parks. And she added in there, Kay and two other dear Marshall girls, Margaret Windler, okay,
Windler.
all right, and Aline Van Haven, Arlene
Van Hound.
Haun,
Uh-huh.
okay. Margaret Windler and Arlene Van Hound came to see 10 Commandments. Must have been a movie or
Yeah.
okay. Dramatic production, I don't know, the movie, I guess. Now we're in 1958, January 4th. This was just a comment she made about Stillwater and Marshall. She wrote, drove home to Marshall in late afternoon. It is always pleasant to get back to the little house. I have a form of schizophrenia. Love Stillwater and Marshall and can't live in both.
Interesting.
On January 5th in 1958, she wrote some things and then she noted, Kay has not come back yet. January 6th, nice to have Kay back. January 22nd, this was the last day of the semester. Kay went home this afternoon. So the semester ended way after Christmas then, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Started in September and ended in January.
See, now they take finals, I think, before Christmas.
They do,
No, we didn't do that.
Okay. February 8th, Kay went home with William. Sharon also went along. February 9th, she wrote about snow. It's snowing that day. And she said, I was a little uneasy about Kay, William, and Sharon, but William said the road had not been dangerous.
No. It was not paved. 51 was not paved.
Oh, it was not paved. Oh.
It was gravel.
I bet it took a while to get home then, didn't
Yeah,
it?
it was, now you can do it in 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It was paved in parts, but not completely.
Huh. Didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. On February 15th, terribly cold today. I took Kay to work to keep her from freezing.
Oh. I don't remember driving me to work.
February 17th, this evening Donna Boyce took supper with us, and then she and Kay went to Vespers at the Wesley Foundation.
Oh.
Okay. February 24th, I had dinner with the Delta something girls. Were you in any organizations that started with the word Delta?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Delta Chi?
I couldn't read.
Couldn't read it?
Mm-mm. For sure. Oh, March 7th, she wrote, yesterday I gave an exam to all 3 of my classes, a total of 130 papers to grade. Today I graded, but I did waste some time. It is hard for me to make myself work. I should have my laziness whipped by this time.
Oh.
Did you ever have the impression she was lazy?
No.
Let's see. Oh, March 10th, 1958, Winnie Brannon and Jerry Schaefer came to see me with the most outstanding plan. They want an appreciation day for me on March 28th. Marshall people have great affection for each other, deserved or undeserved, and this is typical.
That's true. True.
March 14th, Kay is staying tonight at the dormitory so she can get with the girls to a dance. March 28th was the party in Marshall in her honor. Do you remember anything about it? Okay. Let's see. April 3rd, Easter vacation began at noon. Kay is staying because of her office job. April 4th, Kay went home this evening. And then she took a trip to New York around that time period in April. And she noted that you went to pick her up with her car. I guess when she got back from the
Oklahoma
trip.
City?
I don't know. She didn't say. Probably, though.
And I drove her car.
That's what she said.
They didn't fly into Stillwater at that time.
Okay, let's see. On April 30th, she noted that she finished the last thank you for about 200 letters that were sent to her for the March 28th.
Wow.
Yeah.
I probably went to that, I'm sure, but I
Don't remember.
have no memory of that.
Okay. There we go. In May of 1958, she took a few trips. Like she went to the Quartz Mountain and Fort Sill. I think she was doing some research on. She was starting to do some research on Geronimo. Mm-hmm. And she was planning a trip to Europe also around that time period. She mentioned she had a few entries where she talked about not feeling well. Do you remember any health issues with her?
No.
Okay.
I knew she had some health issues after I moved to Stillwater, after we were and I visited her in the hospital, but not while I was living with her.
Okay. May 23rd, 1958. Kay finished her classes this morning, worked this PM, and went home at 5. What a joy she has been to me all winter. The most fortunate thing that ever happened to me was to have her with me.
Oh, nice thing she said. I felt the same way.
Then on May 25th, which was a Sunday, she said she went to Sunday school and church, took dinner with Kay's family. Enjoyed it very much. I think a great deal of Fern and Wilbert.
Mm-hmm.
May 28th at 3, Wilbert Seafelt with Kay and Margaret Windler came with a pickup and moved me home.
Oh. Margaret Windler was my maid of honor at my wedding.
Oh.
She lives in Oklahoma City and calls me probably once a week. And so we're still connected.
You're still connected.
We used to walk home from school together.
Did she come to school at OSU?
One year, I think. Well, after I guess I was living in the dorm, so I must have been after I lived with Angie.
Mhm.
That year.
So your family situation improved and you were able to
Yes, I
move into the
moved
dorms?
into the dorm.
Okay. August 28th, 1958. I believe this was the day Mrs. Engelbrecht died in Guthrie. Funeral in Guthrie, August 30th. I shall not attend because of the heat and Kay's wedding that evening.
Yes, I got married on my birthday,
On your birthday.
21st birthday.
And she wrote on that day, bad dust storm just before morning. My house is deep with it. Do you remember dust on your wedding day? Dust storm?
No, I don't.
Okay. In the evening, Kay and William were married at the church. Lovely wedding of a fine couple. Cool and cloudy today. Sprinkled some. She always comments about the weather throughout her diaries.
Yeah, I remember it sprinkled.
October 21st, 1960. My beloved Kay and William have a boy. Named Troy Eugene. Said announcement card I received later. I think she wrote that little note in later. And I didn't look all the way through all of her diaries. I was focusing on this time period. But I noticed also November 25th, 1960, the Enmeiers, who have had a foreign student in their home over Thanksgiving, brought her this morning to stay with me. She is lovely. Was a woman from Pakistan. I enjoyed her very much. Took her to the top of the elevator and for a drive through the green with wheat country. She loves the soil and the level land as much as I do. So which Enmeiers would she have been referring to in 1960, do you think?
I suppose Bill's parents, Madonna and Albert, who lived in Marshall,
Okay.
on a farm.
Do you recall international students coming to Marshall when you were growing up at all? Okay. Did anything surprise you about her? Living with her?
Not that I recall. Her fastidiousness, like I say, she made her bed every day, very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of just throw things up, but she took it all apart and put it back together.
Did you have a way to do laundry in the apartment?
No, there was no. That's probably why I went home a lot.
Oh, uh-huh.
Took it home.
Mm-hmm.
No, there was not a washer and dryer.
Okay. I've read instances of how frugal she was. Do you remember her being frugal?
That's part of her fastidiousness, I think. She was, she didn't have a lot of clothes. She wore them, well.
Was it typical for that time period, do you think?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Did she have any favorite sayings that you recall when you
No.
think back? Okay. One of the things I've heard was that she would sometimes give people a cookbook or a book when they married, or maybe a Bible when they got married. And a few people mentioned having her recipes or talking about things that she cooked that were especially good. Do you recall
I
anything
just wonder
like
if I had that Prairie City book was maybe my wedding gift. I don't know.
Oh, would you read the inscription in it? So you brought it. And I think that was the first edition.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
This is for my very special young couple, William and Kay Enmeier, who in your home and your community bring the strength of your pioneer heritage to the service of the modern world. Loving you all, it's Angie Debo.
After you married, did you keep in touch with her at all?
Well, I went to her, like I say, I was at the Capitol when her picture was hung, and And I came to her funeral and, you know, but not as, came to Prairie City Days
Mm-hmm.
a couple of times.
Tell me about the Capitol.
Well, I have an autograph from the painter who did the painting.
Mm-hmm.
He signed an autograph to me. There were a lot of Marshall people there. That's all I remember. My memory, you know, when you're 80 years old, you don't remember a lot of things.
And you mentioned that you went to her funeral. What do you remember about that?
Well, it was at the Evangelical Reformed Church, which, you know, it wasn't Methodist anymore. We had a lot of churches in Marshall, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, but they kind of dwindled by that time. She was attending the Evangelical Reformed Church, it consolidated and became the United Church of Christ. And I read an article that I had, there were 500 people there, so I'm sure they filled the basement,
Mm-hmm.
the sanctuary, and stood outside.
Mm-hmm. She received some awards. There were awards given in honor of her after she passed away. They dedicated the Angie Debo Highway up near Marshall.
I've seen that.
There's an elementary school named for her in Edmond. And then I think you mentioned the Stillwater Public Library,
The statue, yes.
the statue. Tell me about that. a
Well,
little bit.
the statue was of her when she was younger,
Mhm.
which I thought was very appropriate. And I was at the dedication for that. And I like the 5 civilized tribes are recognized around the base of her statue.
Mhm. Why does that stand out to you?
Well, because that's where her research was, for the Indians.
Mhm. Was there a contingent of people that were originally from Marshall at that dedication?
Oh, yes, yes.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there were some Indian people. I do have some Indian blood. Very little. My grandmother's mother had a little Indian blood in her.
Mhm.
I don't even know the tribe.
Mhm.
There is some history, I'm sure, in my family, but I don't know.
Now, tell me, your family, were they some of the pioneers of the Marshall area?
My grandfather, who came from England as a young man, did not make the run for the Cherokee Strip, but he came in shortly thereafter and bought his claim from, I always heard that it was from a cowboy.
Mhm.
And they farmed that quarter section north of Marshall for a long time. And then he also had a grocery store, the Beebe grocery store.
What was your grandfather's name?
George Beebe.
George Beebe. Okay.
And then his son Lester took over the grocery store in later years. Grandma and Grandpa Beebe didn't stay on the farm. They moved to town when my mother was in high school. And my Uncle Peck lived in the farm house on the farm, and I remember going there as a child and playing with my cousins, staying in the upstairs. There was a long, wide, the concrete porch across the back. And we played in there. It's on the east side in the shade. We spent a lot of time playing out there.
Is that house still there?
I don't know. That's when we go to Marshall, I'm going to check that out.
Mm-hmm. Is the land still in the family?
I think some of the grandchildren are farming it now,
Mm-hmm.
so it's still in the family.
So that was your mother's side of the family.
Yes.
What about your father's side of the family?
My father's side, they lived on the north side of Marshall on a farm, and that farm is still owned by my cousin. So it's still in family.
Okay, let's shift just a little bit and talk about Marshall again.
Mhm.
So what are some of the things Marshall is known for?
Well, I think probably the band festival. Probably because of this farming community. I remember one year, you know, they moved Marshall. There was the old Marshall, and then when the railroad came, they moved to be close to the railroad. And my folks' house is still part of the old Marshall. And I remember one year they couldn't get enough boxcars to haul the wheat away.
Mhm.
And they piled wheat all the way down Main Street until it could be hauled away. Because, well, there's no place else to go. My dad farmed further north of our home, and he was a tenant farmer. He did not own the farm. My mother hauled the wheat. She drove the truck. And I stayed home and fixed lunch. So Mother would come by with a load of wheat, and she'd check on dinner with me. Then she'd go to the elevator in town and empty the wheat. I remember going with her once, and they used to raise the truck, and wheat would fall out the back into a pit. And that's how they did it. It was scary to lift this truck.
Yes.
I didn't like to do that more than once, I think. But I think it's just the closeness of the people, and this very supportive of the school and the kids and band and the football team and the baseball team and everything. That's what I remember about Marshall.
And when did the wheat crop come in? When was it planted and when was it harvested?
They harvest in June and plant it in the fall,
Mm-hmm.
the hard wheat. And so it's hot when they plant the wheat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when they harvest it.
Mm-hmm. Were there other major crops at that time?
I don't remember. Well, we raised oats and wheat. We had a milk cow,
Mm-hmm.
and we raised chickens. And Saturday night we'd go to town. I'd go to a movie for a quarter, and Mom would bring her eggs and I think maybe cream from our milk cow and sell it at Carter's. I don't know what they call it. Mr. Carter. And we just remember that. And sometimes Saturday afternoon we'd go to the movie
Mm-hmm.
and watch the serials.
Were you living in town or out on?
We lived out on the edge of town.
Mm-hmm.
The house is still there. Mother remodeled the house a jillion times. I would walk home from school with my friend Margaret.
Mm-hmm.
She was on the way, and then I'd go by grandmother Phoebe's house, and we would drink tea and sugar cookies on my way home. and I'd walk on home. And my job was to iron the pillowcases. So I would iron and listen to the radio. We didn't have TV at that time. That was my life.
Mm-hmm. What is the address of the house that you recall? Do you remember?
Well, there is an address, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. So tell me about Marshall's wide Main Street.
When they moved the town from Old Town to Marshall, to be close to the railroad, they paved the street and they thought it was going to be a big city. So they made it wide for streetcars. And of course, that never materialized because the railroad wasn't as big a boon as they thought it would be.
And the flagpole in the middle of Main Street.
Yeah, it's always been there. On Saturday night, we'd cruise Main Street and go around the flagpole and then out and back around the flagpole.
So we talked about Prairie City earlier, and you read the inscription in there. It was first published in 1944. You would have been about 6 years old then. And then later editions have been published. Do you remember when you first read Prairie City? Was it after she gave you that copy, maybe?
Yes, and of course I took Oklahoma history in high school, so I probably read it then. And now I'm rereading it.
Do you recognize people in the book?
Well, kind of, yes. Of course, she changed all the names, but I do, to a certain extent, know who she's talking about.
Is she talking about some of your family members?
Well, yes, my granddad and grandma, Bibi. But not really that I recall.
That was quite a bit earlier. What was their name in the book, do you think?
No, I never placed them that way.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Were there any stories that were recognizable to you? Someone told me about the story about the dog falling in the molasses.
Yeah, I don't recall that at all.
And they thought that was a family story, but then they thought maybe they had just gotten it from the book. It wasn't really a family story.
I don't recall that.
Okay. And then there's tragic stories in there too, of course, with some of the different people in the town and different things that happened, which you may not be to those parts yet if you're rereading it. One of the things I think in the book, though, that comes out, there's a chapter about the Ku Klux Klan. So
that surprised me. I did not remember that being part of Marshall's history. I know I was always told there were no blacks in Marshall. They were supposed to be out before sunset. And so when I came to OSU, this was a whole new ball game for me. These black girls living in close proximity. Even though in high school, in the church groups, we did associate with the Crescent Black Church and had joint meetings, and that was my first introduction to black people. But then living with them in the dorms was all new to me.
What about Indians?
I don't recall that. Now, Mother would tell stories. I said that they lived out on the farm and there was this big concrete porch on the back side of the house. The Indians would come through and they would sit on that and Grandma would feed them. Mother would tell stories about that. Of course, that was before my time.
Okay, if we move back in history again
Back and forth.
to 1969, that was when Marshall started the Prairie City Days, which was an annual community event. Tell me what you remember about Prairie City Days.
Well, of course, then I was probably living in Schneider, 69. No, I was living in Stillwater. We moved to Stillwater in 65. So we just come over and watch the parade.
Mm-hmm.
And Miss Angie would be in this old Model T and lead the parade. And there were bands and Shriners, and it was just a busy day.
Mm-hmm.
Exciting.
Were the roads paved?
Oh, yeah. The roads were paved at that time. I guess I brought 2 kids with me, 2 sons.
Do you remember anything? They used to have bus tours of places around Marshall, and they would hold those during Prairie City Days, and Angie would talk about the history of the area. Do you remember anything about that?
The only thing I remember, there's a monument down the road from where I grew up of, it's a plaque on the wall or a signpost about this being the site of the old Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm sure she would take people bus tours by that plaque.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the stops, I think. Yeah. Okay. Talk about Marshall traditions a little bit. You mentioned earlier the reunions that are held every other year for people, the alumni. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the alumni used to be in the auditorium, but it had fallen into disrepair and roof was caving in. So we couldn't use the school anymore. Marshall lost their school to Covington. They consolidated. And they first lost the high school to Covington, and they kept the grade school for a while. And the buses would meet halfway, and the elementaries would get on the other bus, but then they lost that too. So, and the churches deteriorated. So now the Marshall Dragons own the First Christian Church building. That's our meeting place now. And it seems to be about the only meeting place left in Marshall. And they've decorated, they brought all the school pictures, class pictures, and they've decorated, painted the floors red and black. And that's where our alumni meets every 2 years, I think is what it used to be 3, and now I think it's every 2 years. I don't know.
Do you usually go?
I've gone. I've missed the last one, and I don't know why. I missed one because there were tornado warnings. And I think they really had some real severe weather that year.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed that one. It was when they were still at the school. But yes, I do go as much as I can.
And what happens at the reunion?
Well, some of our classmates will get up and talk, and they have a memorial service of those people who have passed away. We have a dinner, catered dinner, and you meet your classmates. There's only, out of our 11, I think there's only 2 and possibly 3 of us left.
Mm-hmm.
One girl that I lived with in Oklahoma City lives in Edmond now, and I talk to her once in a while. But everybody's gone.
Mm-hmm. What about Decoration Day? Tell me about that tradition.
Decoration Day was always family meeting at the cemetery, decorating graves. The Beebes are out in North Cemetery, and some of the Seafelds are at the South Cemetery. But, with grandmother having 12 kids, all my aunts, we'd all meet out at the cemetery and just visit, But that has dwindled also.
What community stories about Marshall are most commonly shared with younger generations?
I'm not sure there's any because the school's gone. The library, Angie was the librarian to the school, or the library, my school, for a long time, but once she was unable to do that, I think it's all gone now. Marshall has really died.
How does that make you feel?
Well, it just makes me ill when I go over there. They've torn down Grandpa Beebe's store.
Oh.
It's just all boarded up, and the only thing left is the co-op where they take the wheat.
So there's still farming going on.
Yeah, there's still farming. There's still wheat farming going on.
Was it common, so you graduated high school in 56. Was it common for the young people to leave and not stick around Marshall even at that time?
Yes.
Just for more opportunities? And
unless they were helping with the farm, their family. But yes, we all fled.
What should people think of when they think of Marshall, Oklahoma?
Well, it was a wonderful place to grow up. We had, we didn't have drugs. Of course, that was before all that happened, really, but it was just a wonderful place to live.
How do you think Miss Angie influenced the community of Marshall?
She probably did because of her, just her presence. She taught Sunday school class, so she touched a lot of lives through the church.
In what ways do you think the community influenced her?
Oh, well, she came in a covered wagon in the 1800s. And of course, her parents were there. And she appreciated history. So there was an appreciation of the small town.
As you look back on your interactions with her, in what ways, if any, did she influence you when she was alive?
I really can't answer that. I think I was proud to be in her presence and live with her. And of course, that gave me a year of school that I probably, if I'd have dropped out like I had planned, I'm not sure I ever came back. So that was an influence, for sure.
What new insights have you gained about her?
Well,
over the years,
remembering this book that I'm reading now, Prayer City Days, has been wonderful.
Okay. How should people remember her?
As a sweet lady who gave so much to Marshall. She would write letters to everybody. I have several of her letters that she wrote to us. Bill was in a car accident. It was announced in church that Bill Enmeier had been in a serious car accident. But she said, I sit there, in this letter she said, I sit there, I didn't listen to the sermon because I was busy trying to figure out who Bill Enmeier was. To her it was William. I've always been William. To her and his mother. And finally she said she read the Guthrie paper and figured out that it was William. that had been in the accident. She wrote a sweet letter to me.
How do you want people to remember you?
Oh. I don't think anybody does. I mean, I have cousins. We have a cousin reunion every year.
Oh, you do?
On my mother's, the Beebes.
On the BB side?
And Seafelt have a reunion every 2 years.
Oh.
So I like to keep in touch with cousins.
Are those reunions held in Marshall?
Well, we've had several at the community center, and then they were cousin that was in charge of it for 30 years. We had it at the Crescent because they could get us into the VFW there. Her son was a veteran. And the last few years, it was in Moore because the cousin there lived in a gated community and had access to the clubhouse with a swimming pool and tennis courts. And they had it there until she was no longer able to do that. And now we're back in Stillwater, meeting in the motels. And we have one coming up in July, I think. It's usually in June, but I think we couldn't get space until July. So that's when the next one will be.
You look forward to those
Oh, yeah,
reunions?
they're fun.
Is there anything else you would like to share about Angie Debo?
Well, of course, I thank her for allowing me to be in school, and she was a wonderful lady. And reading from her diary brought up things that I had forgotten. We went to Marshall together and things like that. She was a wonderful lady.
Is there anything else you want to share about Marshall?
It was a wonderful community.
And then what about your family? Anything you'd like to share about your family?
Well, I had a very good upbringing. My parents were very, they trained us well. So I had a good life.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating in the interview. It's been interesting to learn more about your life and your background, and then also about Miss Angie and your relationship with her. One thing I didn't ask, were you aware if she ever had anyone else live with her like you did at all?
Oh.
Because she never married or...
No, and I read someplace she did have suitors, but she research to her was very important. Of course, she was at the University of Chicago, and that's where she got her degree, I guess. And so this was her life. And, she sacrificed. Whether she felt that, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the interview today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.